Hello, everyone, and welcome to Revit Template Wizardry, crafting killer Revit templates. My name is Juliana, and I work in marketing here at MicroCAD. And today's presenter is Sandra Volgemuth, our applications specialist. In today's webinar, we will guide you through essential steps of crafting the perfect Revit template. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are interested in that. So as you know, throughout the webinar, you can ask a question at any given point on the left-hand corner. You can ask Sandra any questions or ask her to revisit any step. This is your time, and we want you to make the most of it. And in the upper left-hand corner, you will find links to our social media, website, events, and our YouTube channel. So yeah, make sure to check our YouTube channel. We post all of our webinars there at the end, so you can share with colleagues or watch it on your own time. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to Sandra. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Juliana. Thank you very much for this very nice introduction. Let me share my screen and let's get this going. So, hi, everybody. Let me introduce myself. My name is Sandra Volgemuth. I am an AEC meaning in architectural engineering construction solutions specialist at MicroCAD. I have been so for the last 4 years. I also have a background as a BIM-CAD manager with an engineering firm. I occupied that job for like 7 years. I created a template for my MEP company back then. And since that point, I have been involved a lot with templates, and it's a subject that is very near and dear to me. So today I want to give you some pointers how and what you need to have in mind when you're going to create a Revit template. And just a reminder that having an awesome template will help you start your projects ahead of the game and be on the winning side of things. So back in the day, my boss in my MEP company used to, his dream was that we would develop a template that was like a car that is being exhibited in a car dealership, where the only thing that is missing is the person that is going to drive it. It should have, as you always said, it should have all the windows, the mirrors, an engine, all the tires, all the seats, all the components of a ready-made product. And the driver would be the project that you are going to create, may it be an architectural project or a structural project or an MEP project. So keeping that in mind and keeping that idea of how we're going to put together our car, our template, the first consideration that you have to have is when we talk about Revit templates, there is two approaches to a Revit template. Either you can have a Revit template file as a .rte file, where you will go to your project and choose the model new command, and then you can browse to the location where you have your company's template, and that will create a new project that is going to be project 1 or project whatever the number of templates or projects that you have started on that day. And then that project will be saved in the project folder under the new name. And from that point on, you will be able to continue working. I would say that the definition of using an RTE file versus using a Revit project as a company's template is defined by the fact of one question. Do you need to use work shared projects? Do you use work sets? If the answer is yes, then you should choose to have a Revit project as a company's template, and then the workflow is a little bit different to start the project. So in that case, when you have a Revit project, meaning a .rvt file as your template, you will have to go to the file to the folder where that project is located. Because it is a central model, you will have the option to detach from central, that way creating a new central model, and then you will have to preserve your worksets. That is why you're using an RVT file, because you have pre-created worksets in that project. And then again, it will need to be saved in the project's folder with the new name. Naming standards for projects, from my perspective, is very important, that for every project that you create in your naming standards, you put somewhere, either at the beginning of the project name or at the end of the project name, the release of Revit in which that project was created. So when you're creating your template file, I would create the template file in, and there again, the jury is out to where you have, on what release you need to create your template. If you're an architectural firm, and we all know the architectural firms are the ones that define the version of Revit in which we're going to be working on to the rest of the team, right? So if you're an architectural firm, you can create your Revit template in the latest release of Revit. If you are an MEP or a structural firm, you need to create your template file in an older release of Revit, because you don't know what your architectural client is going to send you as for backgrounds. And we all just need to remember that Revit is not backwards compatible. Okay? So once that definition has been made, first thing that you have to keep in mind is that the template needs to contain all your needed system families. So for architecture, your system families are your wall types, your roof, your ceiling, your floor types, your railings, your ramps, and your stairs. For MEP, you have to keep in mind that your system families are your duct types, your pipe types, your wire types, your cable tray, and your conduit types. Also, you need to define your project units. When you're creating your template, you need to think about creating your line types and what different line types you need, your text types, and your field regions. It doesn't mean that you cannot, either you create them from scratch, or if you have a project where you already developed these system families, always remember that through your Manage tab, there is a command called Transfer Project Standards. And if you have the project where you created all your system families and you have your template project or your template file open, you can always transfer all these standards into your template from different projects, and you can grab stuff from one project to another when you're creating a template file. Right? You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. One of the things that I am really keen on, and it's one of my pet peeves, is naming standards. And naming standards need to be consistent for everything that you name. So I like the way I had named all my sheets. And I like it because it reads very clear, right? And this is based on AIA standards, where the AIA standards state that your naming conventions should go from major to minor, meaning you have your overhead discipline, then you have the level, then you have a further distinction for those drawings. okay? And that is naming standards. Once you define your naming standards, my best advice is always to start writing all those things down so that when you hire new people, you already have a manual for new hirees. And then the better defined that your naming standards are, that your processes are regarding usage of template and work sets and where everything belongs, the better you're off, right? The same as naming standards for families, the same as naming standards for individual types, right? It should be named so that the next person that comes to use your project doesn't need to go about thinking or having to do a whole bunch of clicks to understand what things are. I mean, there is. I always show you the good, the bad, and the ugly in my webinars. There is in the Autodesk given templates, there is a text type that always rubs me a little bit the wrong way, which is called default schedule. And I always kind of go, and who are you, Mr. Default Schedule? That is where I go on naming standards. Now, the other thing that you have to keep in mind when you're creating a template is your parameters. There is two types of parameters that you need to study and learn how to use and what they're good for. One is project parameters. Project parameters, they are awesome in the sense that they are good to push parameters into families. And then if you create a project parameter, let's say for your lighting fixtures, from that point on, any lighting fixture that you bring into that project will inherit that parameter automatically. The only thing that project parameters are not good for is to put them on tags. They cannot be used for tags. If you need a parameter that you want to be pushed onto families and you also want to use it in a tag, those need to be shared parameters. Shared parameters are parameters that are saved on a TXT file outside of the Revit environment. I think both of them are very important. It's very important to think about them and to know how to use them and what you need them for when you're creating your template file. The next thing, keep in mind, you want to create view templates. View templates are your friends. View templates are your friends in the sense that view templates will very easily help you transfer properties of a view from one view to another, and also to keep your company's standards. In your view templates, notice in my templates, there is always a working template. You always want to give your users, your drafters, your designers, your modelers, working views, where they can change everything they want to their convenience. That does not mean that the views that are used for construction documents will be affected, and that is why you need to create those two types of views. Now that I talked about view templates and the views that you need, the view templates that you need to create, let me point out again here, naming conventions so that things are very clear, right? Your plumbing, your mechanical. This was a mechanical and plumbing template, by the way. As you can see, electrical is missing. I have other templates where all three disciplines are included. The next thing that you want to keep in mind when you're creating your template file is that you want to keep your browser organization and how you want to organize your browser. Having a browser organization that works for you, and it doesn't mean that browser organization is one size fits all. I mean, in the last 5 years, I have created for MicroCAD clients 5 or 6 templates. Every company wants to organize their browser differently. This is not a one-size-fits-all thing. So you make up your mind, how do you want to organize your browser? Keep in mind that when I talk about browser organization, I'm not only talking about how to organize your views, I'm also talking about how you can organize and set up your schedules, and how you can organize your sheets and divide them either by disciplines. Notice that here my schedules were organized by all, my sheets are organized by discipline. So whatever browser organization makes you be more efficient in navigating the project browser, that is the browser organization that you need to adopt. Browser organization is controlled through project parameters. So you start seeing how things that I mentioned, they start linking together. Next thing that you definitely want to create in your template environment is your cover sheet. And your cover sheet should contain your legends, your general notes, your abbreviations, your symbols. All that should be done once for the template. And then, yes, I do know and I do understand that not all projects have exactly the same general notes, but the edits of that big text that are the general notes are minimal. It's a little bit of wording, it's a little bit of items that go gone or that get added, but the general consensus, the general the general elements that make up your general notes in its all is very similar to project. So again, this is the idea that we do not want to reinvent the wheel. We want to use that same wheel over and over again. Next item that I find very useful, scope boxes. Scope boxes are your friends. Scope boxes are your friends to set up your crop regions for the views so that they're consistent across multiple floor plans, across multiple individual elements. So you want to create your scope boxes. This is a view where you have all your scope boxes in a 3D view, and then you have them named, and you can move them about, rename them, crop your views by your scope boxes, and have a consistent feel. Schedules. Schedules are hugely important in your project setup, and your schedules depend on your component families that you're going to schedule. And that again trickles down to the concept of project parameters. So those should be also, they should be set up ahead of the game. Your families should be tested so that they populate your schedules in a fairly automatic way, so that you don't have to do that after the fact. You can save time. That does not mean, and this is, I'm coming slowly to my final considerations, that doesn't mean that you want to load all the families that you have gathered, that you have owned, that you have created. You don't want to load them all in your template. I had a template that I was developing for a client of ours, that when I finished cleaning up the file that she wanted to have as the base of her template, the size was 350 gigs. And this was an empty model without any levels. And it was a nightmare. And the nightmare of it was that it had every family and their sister and their friends loaded into that template file. That cannot be. So what families do you want to load into your template file? You want to load the families that you most commonly use. So in my BIMCAD manager workflow, my engineers would call me up and would just say, there is such and such family that I need in every project, and in every project I have to go to the library and load it. that is a family that belongs on a template. There's families that you use only every once in a while. Those should not be on the template. And it's always a balance stuff. It's like life. You always have to balance how much to put, what not to put. What not to do in with template files. Do not reuse a project file by re-erasing the modeled elements. That can get you into a slew of trouble. Did you hear me slow talking? Do not do that. Why? It gave at some point, it created an issue with a template file that I was trying to create for a client of mine that had a slew of levels, as you can see here. It had a level that was placed at minus 29 feet. I was like, were you digging to China? Where does that come from? And she was like, well, I guess it's a remnant. And what is it that they were doing? They were using a project file. They were modeling on that project file. And for the next project, they would start that old project file, delete the modeled elements, and continue working on it. When I say you can have a Revit project as a template, that is not, may I repeat myself, that is not what I meant. You want to keep a pristine, empty Revit project and use that as your template. Do not swipe things over and start modeling anew. Bad habit, bad form can bring, it can create so many issues. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind is this last sentence before I finish my presentation today, is trying to hold on to your CAD standards beyond the functionality of Revit. I have seen, and I know, especially if you're moving from CAD into Revit and you're trying to maintain your CAD standards, there are things that, yes, we can transfer over to Revit. There are things that go anti-functionality of Revit. And if you hold on to those standards for dear life, you will make Revit, which is a very agile program, you will make it clumsy and difficult to use. So all those considerations will bring you to a situation where you have a template that will allow you to get projects faster out the door, get them started faster. Your setup times are going to be cut. And I know this as a fact. It used to take me a day and a half to set up my MEP projects. And by organizing my template, and the more my template advanced, the less time it took. And the less time it took, I was able to cut my setup time for my new projects from 8 to 12 hours to 4 hours. Okay, so that is where you start being able to produce much more. When you produce much more, you produce much more moolah and all that stuff. So, having said that, let me open up the floor for questions.
Thank you, Sandra, for that wonderful presentation. And I see one question here from Tom. It says, how do you maintain product families in templates as products are upgraded and changed by suppliers?
That is why I always advise that you need to have your own component family library in your company. That is why I mentioned that not everything needs to be loaded in the project. And then as components that you are using on a very frequent basis, they get updated, you need to update your template. This is an awesome question, because that was the other thing that I was going to say. Templates are not static. Templates are an ever-growing and evolving element. You cannot have a template and say, this is my template, and navigate with that template for the next 10 years. I mean, my template was always moving forward, was always evolving, was always changing, was always improving.
Thank you. And we have another question. It says, based on your experience, what is a recommended template file size for an architectural firm?
I would say between 50 and 100 gig, not more. If it's bigger than that, just review what families you have loaded in there. You can always lean up your templates. You don't need to have all, as I mentioned, you don't need to have all your components loaded in there. Just remember that Revit is a memory hog. So, I mean, that file that I showed you from 300 gig, I leaned it down to 39. And I mean, it's still evolving. I think when it's done, it's going to be 50 gig. And that is a good file size to start with.
All right. And the third question I see is there a way to share printing standards in the project templates?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, 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 yes. That is part of your all your print setup should be set up in your template. I didn't mention it here, but yes, that needs to be set up in your template so that that stays maintained across the board. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And another question we have is what is your advice regarding typical details created in CAD?
Oh, beautiful, beautiful question. Um, Revit has, and let me jump to Revit here for a moment. In Revit, you can always go insert from file and insert details from a detail model. I create details through drafting views. I create them in a project that is not my templates because usually, I mean, everybody comes from CAD. There is no, I mean, unless you are a brand new company and just landed on this universe, you never did anything in CAD. Those are the only people that can create their details straight in Revit. But if you have a big library of details that you created in CAD, you want to input them into a separate project, not your working project, not your template file. You can bring them into a drafting view, and then from your drafting view, you can explode them. You can make them into Revit entities. You need to purge the that file and clean it up because the minute you explode a CAD file within Revit, you inherit a lot of junk. So that needs to be cleaned out. And then once you do that, then through this insert from and import a typical detail into your project. If you are members of Autodesk University, a colleague of ours has a tech talk in Autodesk University, and she's going to present it this year in Vegas again. That shows you the workflow of how exactly to do that. You can look for her in Autodesk University under Andrea Gonzalez, and it's how to move from CAD into Revit.
Absolutely. And the last question I see right now is can I use a system family that was created in another project in my current template?
Yes, as I mentioned, and let me show you where that command is in Revit. Let me come back here into Revit. If you go in Revit to your Manage tab, this is the command here. The Transfer Project Standards allows you to bring from any other project, allows you to bring system families into your current project or into your template file.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. And as a reminder for everyone, if you want to learn any of these topics in detail, you have on the left hand the MicroCAD website, so you can check all of our training options. And you can always take a custom training with Sandra if you want, or someone else on our team. And we also offer group classes online. So yeah, be sure to be checking the MicroCAD website for future webinars. And I think this concludes this webinar today. Thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you all.